Hello, everybody. Welcome to Unbound Wisdom. Today, we are speaking about what I call the space between lives, which is that period in between leaving one physical incarnation and then reincarnating in a different body. I call this space of time, space between lives, because there is a lot of different processes that take place. And I've done a lot of research myself, working with many clients over the years, as well as doing my own regressions on myself to witness this space between lives, because it's always been very fascinating to me. Also read many case studies from Michal Newton. So if you are interested at all in diving further into this topic, I highly recommend his work. He has spent decades uh, doing a regression technique on his clients and then has recorded the findings. So there are hundreds of case studies that you could read through. His method is a little bit different than the regressions that I do because he does his regression solely for the purpose of witnessing the space between lives, which he calls life between lives. So what he will do is he will have a client do a hypnotic regression, relive a past life, and then go through the process of that death in that lifetime. And then he will note what happens upon death. And that's where the vast majority of the client session will be spent, is in that space between lives. Now, myself, when I have clients that come to me, most of the time we do a past life regression that is a hypnotic session completely centered around learning about a past lifetime, whether it's healing trauma or just learning a little bit more about the lessons from that lifetime, or having a better understanding about where their soul is at in its soul evolution. So the purpose of the two different techniques is a little bit different. However, I do notice that in many regressions, if the client is able to witness their death in that lifetime, they will pass on to a place that I call the space between lives. And what I find is interesting is many of the client sessions that I've done collaborate very intimately with the case studies that I've read from Michal Newton. So I compiled information between the two sources, and I wanted to share with you today. I also want to mention that Rudolf Steiner, and I know I talk about him a lot, so I won't belabor that point today. He did a ton of esoteric work on what he calls the portal after death. I think he calls it the portal after death, or um, beyond the gates of death. So if you were interested in having a more esoteric perspective on this, and maybe even more like deeper spiritual understanding, you could look into his work. He has tons of different lectures that reference that. So what I have noticed is upon death, the soul usually witnesses itself leaving the body in some way. Most of the time, we see it as floating above our physical body. And you hear lots of people that have maybe died for a period of time and then come back to life talk about going through a tunnel, maybe going through a dark tunnel, following a light, um, having a narrowing of their vision such that everything goes black and then all of a sudden becomes very bright again. But for the most part, the regressions that I've done and how I've experienced it myself is upon seeing the death of the body, the soul witnesses itself flying or floating above that death or above the body. So often, if it's a traumatic death or if it's a sudden or chaotic, unexpected, painful, um, oftentimes the soul lingers a little bit on the earth plane. And this happens if there are loved ones left behind. And I covered this in a prior video where we talked about that, where a soul can remain on the earth plane for a period of time in order to make sure that the loved ones are doing okay without them. But after a certain period of time on the physical plane, usually that soul will be able to pass on to higher dimensions. And a lot of this would people would call this passing on to heaven, um, or space between lives, like I call it. Now, The soul at this point is met by guides or ancestors or loved ones that have passed on before them. Always, 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 the soul is met by someone that helps them to feel safe and secure. And the overwhelming sense is love at this reunion. The guides or ancestors or prior loved ones will appear in a way that's going to, in a form, a bodily form, or at a certain age, a certain outfit, even in a way that's going to comfort the person that has recently passed. Because during this certain period, the soul still has vast ties to the earthly plane. So there is still a lot of attachment, a lot of imprints on the soul, where the whole idea of this time period is to help the soul to become acclimated to the spirit world, to that higher dimensional realm. So we will encounter beings, whether it's our guides or ancestors or angelic beings, even, that are going to help us feel safe, secure, welcome. It's an elated feeling across the board at this stage, because the whole point would be that we feel welcome as we pass over. And many people experience this state differently. And what I find is that it has a lot to do with the the belief system that's embedded in the person that just passed, or their understanding and expectations of what they're going to find, or the level of soul advancement that that person has achieved. So for instance, a lot of people might see this as a gathering place, a meeting hall, even a party, as they enter into the spirit realm. Myself, when I've experienced it, I've actually experienced it in two different ways. One was a giant meadow. It felt very welcome and sunny and warm. And the other way was truly just clouds, like a lot of people would picture heaven, or like it's been depicted in movies, um, just floating up above in the sky in some beautiful clouds. But either way, the point would be that it would be welcoming, warm, and loving to the soul that's crossing over. If we think about Earth or our existence as kind of an evolution of soul growth as a school, if we think about the cosmos as a school, we are here incarnated on Earth to learn and grow. And ideally, our growth would be an ever ascending spiral. This is the way that I think about it. So we might have a certain lesson that we're trying to learn over many, many, many incarnations. And the way I see it is like a spiral, and it's hopefully ever ascending. So maybe we have 100 incarnations where we're actually learning about lessons of love. And each time we incarnate, we look at it from a different perspective, and ideally a higher perspective every single time. So we might incarnate one time and learn about what's not love in order for us to come back the next time and learn about what is love, or love in the material plane versus love in a higher plane. Connecting with creator as far as like a deep seated true love, or even embodying more love in a spiritual sense. So the reason I mention this is because that is in my estimation, the big reason why we move on to what I call the life review. And Michael Newton refers to it as the book of life. And a lot of people see this as a classroom, or as maybe, sometimes people see it as, um, I think about in Harry Potter, where there's the table of all the grand wizards, or the um, headmasters of his school, and he goes in front of the board to review certain things. This is kind of how it's been shown to me and to several of my clients, and then also as it's described in Michael Newton's work, where we go into this giant life review. And the whole point would be to look at the different life paths that we had in our incarnation that we just left, and to review the major decisions that we made. We'd look at what are the giant choices we made? What are even the smallest choices that we made? And how did that affect the trajectory of our life and therefore affect the lessons that we were there to learn and the soul growth that we were hoping to accomplish in that incarnation? So, what's beautiful about this life review is that oftentimes the soul will go into it feeling a little bit despondent or a little bit disappointed in some of the decisions that were made or the way that things played out. And we review all these different paths in life from a higher bird's eye level. So it's like from a higher spiritual perspective. And it helps the soul to see that no matter what we did, no matter any of the things that happened in our lifetime, we see it from a higher level and we see how it helped us grow. So, for instance, we might have encountered a lot of trauma as a child. Let's just say, as a 3-year old, we had some very severe, terrible things happen to us, and we go into that life review, and we can see that trauma from a bird's eye view. And instead of holding on to that trauma and allowing that energy imprint to stay in our energy body, we can see it from that higher perspective, and we can see that maybe the trauma that we incurred helped us be stronger later on in life. Or maybe we went through a bunch of stuff as a little kid, but it helped us learn and grow, and then it helped us be able to have a career as a counselor later in life where we helped numerous people through their issues, right? Through similar problems. It gave us compassion, it gave us fortitude, it gave us different perspective in life, right? So no matter what happens in our life, there's ways that we can learn and grow from it. And what we recognize in going through this life review is that all these different things that happened to us helped shape and grow us as a soul. And the beautiful thing about this is it can help to release these energetic blocks that we may still be holding on to, especially if there's regret or remorse or disappointment or pain or fear around certain things that happened in that last lifetime. Looking at it from the higher perspective can help us to dissolve these energetic imprints, which is great because then we are not laden with them in our next incarnation. Also, looking at these different life paths and the trajectory that our life took can help us to make different decisions in our subsequent incarnations. So, the whole idea would be we incarnated and made some choices that were harmful for others, let's say. We can look at it from a higher perspective and be like, now I see how that played out, and I'm not going to do that next time around, as a very basic instance. It also could be I incarnated in this lifetime and I learned what it's like to not have love in my life or to not be a loving person. So next time I'm going to be a loving person, or I'm going to make different decisions, different choices that will lead me in a different direction. But all of it has to do with really valuing the growth that we had in that lifetime and the way that our soul evolved. Because no matter what, our soul is going to evolve in each incarnation. Um, this is a really fascinating thing. I'll give a tiny instance of a past life that I've actually had where I was a pirate and I did very, very bad pirate things. Very, very bad. But as I was sitting in that life review, I was able to see all of the things that cause others harm and pain and suffering. And I was able to see what it was like to live a life of complete service to self. And it was very instrumental in me having that big spurt of growth in my soul, because now I know what it's like to live a life of service to self, and I'm not going to choose that again. So it was a difficult life review to have, but it was so valuable because it helped me grow so much as a soul. This life review we often experience too in a way where we can put ourselves in other people's positions. So how it's been shown to me and how it's been described to me actually from several of my clients, it reminds me of, if you watch Star Trek at all, they go into the holodeck is what they call it, which is basically a holographic existence where they can play out different life scenarios. And it reminds me so much of the holodeck is wild because we can put ourselves into scenes from our prior life and switch roles with the person that was in that scene with us so that we have a deeper understanding of what our actions did to other people. So, for instance, if we were in a lifetime where we victimized other people, we can put ourselves in this, what I think of as the holodeck. We can put ourselves into these scenes in the role of the victim, in the role of the people we victimized. And we can see how it felt. We can live it from their eyes, from their shoes, and really have a deep understanding of the way that our actions affected them. And what's beautiful about this is it can help us to release some of the karma that we may have racked up in our lifetime without having to reincarnate in the physical plane and go through that pain ourselves. So it's really no secret that, if we are the perpetrators in one lifetime, often we come back in the next lifetime and we are the victims. And this is not to say that, and it's so difficult to think this way, I understand, because it's not to excuse anyone's behavior, in perpetrators' behavior, or people that have, you know, done heinous acts on innocent people. But at the same time, we know that those acts are racking up trauma and racking up karma that they will have to sort out in a subsequent incarnation. But oftentimes in this period, the space between lives, going into this holodeck and really holodeck, I'll call it that, just that's my word. Um, really reliving these scenarios from a different perspective helps to release some of that karma so that next incarnation, even small transgressions, like we all make mistakes, even small things that we do that might harm another person, we can go and relive them in that holographic state and release some of the karma that we racked up as a result of that, and just gives us a real sense of how our actions affect other people and how we're all interconnected. And it's kind of like this observation period as we experience as a means of teaching us, further teaching us soul lessons, from the lifetime that we just left. I did want to mention a little bit too about the way that our souls appear in the space between lives, the way that we see other souls in the space between lives, and even can see ourselves sometimes in these regression sessions. So at this point, usually after we've lived out certain things that we needed to in the holodeck, the appearance of our physical body shifts and it becomes more of a light body. This has been reported over numerous case studies from Michal Newton, and I've experienced it myself in my work. And what I believe is that the color that our soul is seen in has a lot to do with the lessons and experiences that we've already achieved. So it has a lot to do with the point in evolution that we've already attained for our soul. And what Michal Newton would call a core color, which is the solid state color of that light body, represents the level of evolution that we're at, and the amalgamation of all the experiences that we've had, and all the accomplishments that we've had over our many incarnations. He goes so far as to have a labeling system where he says a certain color means level 1, a certain color means level 2. And I personally don't ascribe to that. I really have have a hard time with labels. I have a terribly difficult time with labels because I don't think it's as cut and dry as that. Although our human minds like to order it and make it so, I have a deep feeling and deeper understanding that the colors are only symbolic of the experiences and accomplishments and emotions and the where we've been as far as a soul over thousands of incarnations, as opposed to what level we are in a hierarchical system. But that's my opinion. And so you could read a little bit more on it's in Journey of Souls by Michal Newton, if you're interested in reading a little bit more about that. Now, beyond just the core, we also see often a halo around the souls as it's represented in this space between lives. And this halo represents the attributes and the aspects that we're working to embody in our upcoming incarnations. Kind of like what's our next curriculum going to be, and it can be represented by the color that we see in the halo around the person. And I want to note that I've done extensive work in the Akashic records to have a deeper understanding of this. I wanted to know if the halo that we see around the core of the soul in the space between lives has any correlation to the auras that people that clairvoyants might see on the physical plane. I was really excited because I thought that it might correlate, but it is very clear in my current level of understanding that there is no correlation between the way that we experience people's auras here on the physical plane and the way that we see the halo in the space between lives. So I just wanted to throw that out there. As far as I've been shown currently, that there's not a correlation. From this point, there's many different things that can happen for the soul. And if we look at time as being linear, a soul can spend a soul can spend 1 linear year in the space between lives, 6 linear months in the space between lives, or the soul could spend 1,000 years. Truly, there really is no limit to the amount of time that can be spent in the space between lives. It really has to do with the soul continuing its learning process, the soul continuing its healing process, because oftentimes in the space between lives, our soul uses it as a time to regain all the spiritual power, bring all the pieces of the soul back together if possible, and kind of uses it as a rest period before reincarnating again. So it's not like we pass on and then we immediately reincarnate the next day. If we look at it in a linear way, it's not always like that. In fact, very rarely. um, if did you ever watch the movie Chances Are? I think about that a lot because that was one of my very favorite movies growing up, which isn't that surprising. Now, knowing what I do for a living now, I always thought that was a really fascinating concept. Um, but the premise of that is that this man dies before he can propose to his fiance, and then he reincarnates in a different body, and it turns out to be it turns out to be his fiance's daughter's new husband. Anyway, I have never seen something like that where the soul passes away and comes back into the direct family line. I'm not saying that that can't happen, but I feel like it's very rare. My sense is that it's very rare. My current understanding is it's very rare. I have not experienced it myself, nor have I found it in any literature, although it did make a good movie. So, when the soul is ready to reincarnate again, it will go and meet with the Council of Elders. This is Michal Newton's term for it, the Council of Elders. A lot of people experience this as what we would think of a table of wise elder souls, a table of wise elder beings. And really, the soul that's going to reincarnate stands in front of the elders and does a giant review again of all of the past lives, not just the prior one, most recent in linear terms one, but all of the lives. And so the elders know the growth of the soul, the elders know the complete path of the soul, and the elders know where the soul needs to move next so that it can attain its desired growth. So they know our history and they're able to help us see the bigger picture regarding our evolution. And what they go over are very general, broad questions like, have we met our objectives as far as lessons in the past lifetimes? And if not, what can we do differently next time? How can we structure our next life so that we meet those objectives? They're also this is fascinating to me. They're very interested in how the body we chose in our past life served us. So we choose our body before we incarnate. Now, the elders that we meet, the wise beings that we meet ahead of incarnation, will give us tips and advice and kind of try to nudge us in a certain way to pick a certain body. But really, we get to choose how we incarnate. We can choose whether we're male or female. We choose who our parents are. We choose which nation we decide to incarnate in, what our race is going to be. We choose all of that prior to incarnation. And with the help of the elders, because they know where our soul desires to go and they counsel us on what body we may choose. So they're very interested to know how our past physical vessel worked and was and helped us to achieve our goals. Now it's not did you like your body last time? It's not really that. It's about how well did the physical vessel that we selected serve you in achieving the objectives that you chose to achieve in that lifetime, because then they take that information and help us to select one for the next life. um One thing that I want to note too, this has always stuck in my mind. In reviewing a past life, they're very impressed by what we would think are seemingly small acts of kindness. So one example is a case study from Michal Newton, where the gentleman achieved very, very significant material success in his lifetime. I believe he was a stockbroker or something, and he had amassed a lot of wealth, and he had what, a lot of people would, at least in physical terms, material terms, consider a highly successful life. But the council was not at all interested in any of that material stuff. They were interested in the time that he helped an elderly lady onto the bus. They belabored that point. They were interested in a time where he shared his meal with a homeless man that he met on the street. These generous acts where we connect with others on a very deeply human level, where we connect in a heartfelt and genuine way in the service of others, these are the instances that make a difference. These are the instances that stand out to the council. And I remember reading through that case study and just being in awe of the fact that we don't need to make millions of dollars so that we can donate it to charity, although that's amazing too, if that's a possibility. Um, Even if we make no money, we can extend an act of kindness to a stranger or to a loved one, or just to somebody that's in our circle that we meet. A smile, eye contact with someone when we're walking down the street. We never really know how these things can brighten another person's day and how significant they are on a spiritual level. So that really stuck with me. The life review and the things that are important in our life, for the most part, have nothing to do with material success. For the most part, the elders, our council of elders, the divine beings that are guiding us, they are mostly impressed by what we might think are seemingly small acts of kindness in our everyday life. And then finally, they want to help us understand how the life we just live will fit in with our soul's curriculum moving forward. And all of that information and kind of the discussion that we have with this council of elders is all done with the most love. There is never judgment, there is never persecution, there is never anything but the most pure, genuine, and divine love exchanged from the elders, because they want nothing but the best for us, and they understand the trials and tribulations that we're going through as our soul develops. So the largest part of this meeting is to help the soul see themselves that the way the elders see them, to see themselves through the eye of love, to see themselves through the eyes of the divine, and then somewhat of a debriefing in order for them to have direction in their next incarnation. And then lastly, as we're ironing out our plans for our next lifetime, we go again to the space of transformation. Again, I see this as kind of like a holodeck type scenario where we have a chance to try out different bodies, different life paths, um, different broad themes for a upcoming life, and even time frames for that lifetime. So maybe we want to learn what it's like to live in famine. So we try a couple different scenarios in this holodeck, different time frames that we can move to. Uh, I genuinely believe at this place, at my current understanding, and this could change, but right now I believe that we have a chance to experience any time frame in this space between lives. We have a chance to incarnate during any time frame, especially when we think about time as not being linear. So my belief is that we might say, I want to go back and live in 1930 um, in the Great Depression. So even though it's 2022 right now, we might decide to go back to 1930 because it's kind of like, since it's not linear, we can choose any time frame that we feel might fit our soul's expansion at that particular moment. It's hard to wrap your mind around, right? It's really hard. But my current understanding is that we have the option to incarnate in any time frame. So that's something that we might try out in this holodeck. We also uh, have certain agreements and contracts and soul vows that we make with other people that are in our soul collective. I've done videos on this before on the idea of soul group or soul collective, and the main gist of it is we often incarnate with the same group of souls because we are either bound because we have deep soul binds with one another, or we're on the same evolutionary path. So we agree to incarnate together in order to help each other out along the way. Uh, really depends on the evolution of the soul, in my opinion. You may have hundreds of people in your soul group or your soul collective, and you may have a smaller amount of souls. Rudolf Steiner he taught that the farther advanced we become on our soul's path, on our soul's evolution, the less people we have in our soul group. So we might start out with 500 in our collective, and then it narrows down over many, many, many incarnations. And as we advance even deeper along that soul or our evolution, we may only have like 5 people that we incarnate with that we consider to be our soul collective. But the whole point would be, I have an astrologer that I follow who talks about the cafeteria of souls, and his name is Ron. I'll link his information below in case you're interested. He's an evolutionary astrologer, and he talks about the cafeteria of souls somewhat like we might be sitting in a cafeteria and we might say, hey, I was an abusive father last lifetime. Now I want to have an agreement with someone to be the abused child. I mean, I know that's heavy stuff to talk about, but um and somebody in your soul group might say, yes, I love you so much that I am willing to sign up for that. I'm willing to sign up to be the perpetrator so that you are able to grow in the way that you're wishing to grow in. So this is something that we can try out in that holodeck right before we incarnate. Our physical body, the time frame that we're in, the certain contracts and the ways that it might play out with the people that we've agreed to incarnate with. And another really big thing that I see happen is this idea of soulmates. And this could be a deep connection that you have with a loved one, and you have it agreed that you'll meet at a certain period of time in order to have a relationship. And you will play out these scenarios in the holodeck over and over and over until you feel certain that you'll be able to recognize that person on the earth plane. You even might set it up and say, these are 3 different scenarios that we might meet in. We might meet when we're 20 in school. We might meet when we're 30 at a coffee shop. We might meet when we're 40 at the library. And then play out these different scenarios to see how it affects your life, the paths of the individual lives. And then also so that there's that deep recognition on a soul level when you do meet. If you've ever had that experience where you meet someone and you feel like, wow, I know you from somewhere. It is quite possible that it's because you've either had past incarnations and you're recognizing them on that soul level, or because you have soul contracts with them and you've played that exact scenario out in the space between lives so that you would be assured to recognize each other when that meeting happens. So truly the whole point of the space of transformation, or what I call the holodeck, is just for us to try out different scenarios and timelines and experience ourselves as different energies and help us understand which lessons we want to incorporate in our upcoming incarnation. So that was a lot today, wasn't it? I could talk for hours on this topic, but I think I'll leave it for now. If you are at all interested in experiencing a past life, maybe whether you have some trauma that you want to heal or some blocks that you want to move past, oftentimes we can locate them in doing a regression session. Or if you're curious to see if you can experience that space between lives period, um, I'll link all my information below and you can make an appointment. I actually opened up some availability in July and August because my life has settled down a bit and I'll be able to take on more one-on-one clients. So all the information is linked below if you're interested. As always, I am so honored that you're here and greatly appreciate every one of you for listening. And if you have questions or feedback, please let me know. I am always available. With that, I will let you go. Until next time.